Facebook. Okay. We are live on YouTube. And let's see here. Facebook is trying to go live. It always has that lag time. Don't know why. And actually the Wi-Fi looks pretty bad on Facebook right now.
Should we turn off our...
It might help. I don't know. Okay. Okay. So I think I'm live on Facebook as well, but we're very stuttered. Very stuttered. That's okay. I think YouTube's okay. I'll open prayer. Yeshua, I pray that you would, I do pray to be empowered by your Spirit. I pray to be baptized with your Spirit. I pray that you would immerse me, you would fill me, you would help me. I entrust to you every conscience that's here. I request, Lord, that we would be equipped by you. I confess to you that when I look at out at the world by sight on my flesh, it seems so impotent and effete and pointless, futile, vain. And I feel that I feel overwhelmed by the vanity of a weak creature like me just speaking and expecting things to change. I know that they'll change because you accompany my speaking with power, and you're the one that changes them. And I thank you, Lord, that when my heart fills me, you're the strength of my heart, my portion forever. And I request, Yeshua, that you would help me to speak clearly and proclaim the word boldly as I ought to, and make plain things that you were speaking to me last night. Help me. I ask in Yeshua's name, amen. Okay, so I'm gonna try to discuss multiple points. This actually been a great day to have my chalkboard. I don't have it, so sorry for that. Which means I may just, I'm going to try my best without the ability to kind of show you pictures. I may end up just making it more discussion oriented and trying to double back and redress this tomorrow, certain parts. So maybe this could be like this is the fourth talk on baptism. Maybe it'll be divided into two parts. You guys could be part of the we'll see what happens part. And maybe tomorrow will be more polished. Okay. So I titled the talk. It's the fourth baptism talk. I titled it "Baptism in Fire," the pillar of cloud / fire, and the water that came from the rock, or the rock that was the Messiah, something like this. Okay. We're still in the territory. We're still in the Torah, in the territory of Moses. So we're still discussing Moses. We're talking about Moshe. In Exodus 17, an event happens. I think it's repeated in Numbers 20. Or a similar event takes place as to what took place in Exodus 17 later on in the story of Israel in Numbers 20. One is the example of Moshe providing water that pours out of a rock for the people of Israel in an obedient way. And the other is where he ends up providing water for them, but he's disobedient. He ends up being disqualified from even entering the land. And that's one component that I want to discuss. There are a lot of separate components that I wanted to draw together. I should make it more discussion oriented, because the way that I received a lot of the kind of pieces that I want to lay out in front of you today came through prayer last night. I was, again, maybe I need to figure something out. I got to get over my anti-medicine thing. I have no problem with medicine. I take it when it's convenient for me, but I don't like to depend on it. So I got this bad acid reflux thing. I've been waking up at like midnight hour every night for, I don't know, feels like a week now, which is great. Every time I wake up, I sit up and I get in a meditative position and I talk to Yeshua. And but I just can't. I'm kind of in this weird state for like 2 hours, and I feel like he's been equipping me, and I've been bringing him the issue. Okay, what about? I bring him a lot of issues at that time, late at night, but I've been bringing him the issue of foundation talks, and he's been equipping me with things to bring up. One of the things that I think would be helpful for you is you keep saying that baptism is foundational, that it's, but I don't think I've ever actually taken care to explain what I mean in some of these talks about what makes it foundational, or what makes a thing rather foundational. And I'll give you a short version. What makes a element foundational is if the structure that is God's temple, if the structure that's trying to be God's temple lacks that element, it will fall. It won't be able to withstand this age. This age generates storms and floods, destructive forces, and it will always test what we build for Messiah. Everything you try to build for Yeshua, the enemy will try to destroy for his own kingdom. Because everything you build for Yeshua is an outpost or an expansion of his kingdom. And Hasatan will not share his kingdom with Messiah. This is partly, you are a soldier. You are a follower of Yeshua, you are a soldier. Messiah is prophesied in Isaiah as having a sword coming out of his mouth in Isaiah 22. He's described as a man of war in Isaiah 63. In Revelation, a sword issues forth from his mouth. It's the word that he gives. So that passage is very meaningful to you. I've come to bring a sword. It's actually the sword of the word that comes out of his mouth, which is the spirit of prophecy, which he reveals the secrets of hearts and forces every conscience into a valley of decision. So he says, I came to bring a sword and to divide houses. This is kind of, I suspect this is somewhat of a throwback to Shlomo, to Solomon, who who used the sword for dividing the baby. It's a very dark picture. But wisdom itself was always spoken of as having holding. Wisdom incarnate was described as the word of God holding a double-edged sword sharper than that's able to divide between all kinds of issues. This is not even just in Hebrews. This is in other books like the Wisdom of Solomon. The author of Hebrews picks up on that. But we're at war. Storms will be issued forth, and they'll come against what you build. Anything you try to do for Yeshua. There is the truth that 1 Corinthians 15 tries to give us. It's like the last verse of 1 Corinthians 15. I think it's like if it's not the longest chapter in the New Testament, it's pretty damn close. I think it has like 70-ish verses or something. I can't remember, something like this. 60, 70-ish verses. And at the end it says, no labor done in the Lord is done in vain. Okay? That's a hopeful verse. And I think what it means is no labor done in the right spirit will be overlooked by the Lord, and therefore it will not be vanity for you, the one who performed it, right? However, the immediate effect of the labor that you perform in the Lord can be made to be vanity through the work of Hasatan, the tempter.
Can or can't?
Can. Paul is so serious about this that when a labor starts in Thessalonica, they have to be taken away. They leave Thessalonica. And they're really consternated, like, what's happening to the assembly there? What's happening to the churches in Thessalonica? Are they standing their ground? Like, they're described in beautiful terms. They turned from idols to serve the living God. They were filled with the Holy Spirit. They received the word of the apostles as though it was the word of God, not the word of man, which it was. Okay? They began to serve each other in love, and they grew in brotherly love. Very wonderful, genuine outbreaking of the Spirit. A church is being born. They leave that church, and Paul is just really consternated. The other apostles are really consternated. Are they losing their faith? He literally says the phrase, when I could bear it no longer, I sent Timothy, another apostle, I sent Timothy to check on your faith. It was like taking a pulse from Timothy. I sent Timothy to check on your faith to see that our labor, lest the tempter had tempted you and our labor was in vain. Okay? So your labor that you perform for Yeshua can be made, like, in terms of its effect in this age, it can be made vanity. It can be made vanity. Now, all the labor you do for the Messiah, it will, so long as you hold to the Messiah, it can't be touched by the enemy in that sense because it's being stored in heaven. You have Yeshua saying, hey, you guys seem to like treasure. You're pretty evil people. If you really like treasure, you shouldn't store it up here, because in this place, in this age, thieves break in and steal, and rust destroys it, and moth destroys it, right? If you really like treasure, like I said, you guys are pretty evil people, you should store up your treasure in heaven, where thieves don't break in and steal, rust and moth do not destroy, right? So when I say that something is So I'm just giving you a distinction there, that labor you do in the Lord is storing up a reward for you in the resurrection. But the work you do for the Messiah here can actually be undone. So you should be urgent. You should be vigilant. You should be prayerful. You should be alert. All of these things, all of these commands suddenly come to life in the New Testament when we realize, oh crap, the enemy can basically just pervert, warp, and corrupt the work that didn't make it not. We are at war. It's not a fake war. It's not a pretend war. So when I say something's foundational, I'm at least giving you, I'm giving you a definition that is when, oh man, this camera, it's not focusing. Let's see here. There we go. Awesome. When I'm saying foundational, I just want you to understand it's an element or a component that if the structure that you're building for Messiah is lacking this element or component, when the storms, the enemy sins come, which they will, not when they come, they will do damage to your effort and to your labor and to your work. Yeah.
How do you determine, or like, is there a way to know like whether or not something is foundational besides just like the structure?
Yeah. That's so I'm using
yeah.
I'm giving a more pragmatic definition so that people can at least imagine. Okay, I do stuff for Jesus. I want that stuff to stand. I got to make sure this stuff's in the foundation and the base of it, right at the bottom of it. I'll give you the parable Yeshua gave, because there are other ways to determine it. Because when Paul uses the word foundation, when the author of Hebrews uses the word foundation, and oracles of God, they start throwing around these words that really closely relate to the scripture and the Torah that Israel received and the manifestation of Yahweh to Israel directly. And that this
as being the foundation.
Yeah, and as being like, it's weird. Yeah, you get weird ideas that are too complicated for this discussion for now. But I'll give you this parable. After Yeshua, the rabbi or Messiah, teaches a ton of people. It's the famous. They call it the Sermon on the Mount. Okay, he has this. I don't know why they call it a sermon. Sermons aren't a thing. He instructs. He's instructing people on this hillock. And he's instructing his disciples, and these crowds gather. And he's instructing from their perspective, he's instructing with great authority. I'm going to talk about that much later in Foundation Talks, so that he speaks with authority. Just suffice it to say, he didn't interpret Moses the way the other rabbis interpreted Moses. He just talked about it like he could just go up to a Torah scroll and tell you, no, this is what it meant all along, basically is how he taught. And that shocked the crowds because people were not allowed to approach the Torah this way. And it was very brazen for him to do that. But he finishes this sermon, and this is why it matters to us. He finishes this instruction and this telling with a parable. It says, the man who hears what I teach and puts them into practice is like a man who built his house on a rock. And the storms came, and when they came, the wind blew and beat against that house, and the water flooded. And after it was done, the house withstood it. Standing. The one's hearing what I say and does not do them and put them into practice. He is like a man who built his house on the sand. Okay, and for all intents and purposes, you can literally imagine the exact same. That's how important this is. That's how important foundation is. Exact same house, how we live. He built his house on the sand, and when the storms came and the winds beat against that house and the waters rose, it came down with a great fall, never to rise again. So, have a good day. That's how it's finished. So
don't be those people.
Yeah. It's like, Yeshua always try to finish with positive vibes. Okay. So baptism is foundational, but there are other components of baptism, right? This idea that it's immersion. I said something the other day, and last night I was kind of meditating on this, and I think the Lord brought it to mind because it's actually an order in the Torah. We really only talked about the day of creation, the flood, the life of Noah, and the beginning of the life of Moshe. It's really what we discussed. So I am skipping a little bit of the order because I'm not talking about the Red Sea today. I'll probably do it tomorrow or extend today. We'll see. But I wanted to bring together certain components from other parts of Scripture to show you how this unifies it. This idea that God's heart is to baptize. God's heart is to immerse, and what that can look like in light of the Torah. So one of the things that I was struck with last night is this phrase that Paul uses. Let's actually today begin with a new covenant text. I normally start in the Torah, and sometimes if I have time, I work in the new covenant. But let's go to something Paul says in 1 Corinthians 15. Okay. Heavy stuff. No, I'm sorry. I said 15. What's wrong? 10. Brain. Okay. For I do not want you to be ignorant, brothers. 1 Corinthians 10, verse 1. For I do not want you to be ignorant, brothers. That's a good start to a sentence. Whoever starts their sentence this way should listen. For I do not want you to be ignorant, brothers and sisters. We don't want ignorant sisters. That our fathers were all under the cloud and all went through the sea. Under the cloud and all went through the sea. I didn't visualize that. Okay. They passed under the cloud and all went through the sea. That's how this episode is being described. Yeah. And all were baptized into Moses in the cloud and in the sea. And all ate the same spiritual food and all drank the same spiritual drink. For they drank from the spiritual rock that followed them, and the rock was Messiah. What the hell is Paul talking about? Okay, I will say this. Sounds really Jewish, right? This is really Jewish stuff. Most people don't describe baptism and Jesus stuff this way. What are you doing, Paul? Actually, this is a really funny text because a lot of people who don't understand Paul, they just throw their hands up and they're like, oh, he just came to change everything you should have did. I don't care to actually think about what Paul was trying to put into practice and what he was trying to manifest in his ministry. But Paul is incredibly Jewish. He's not trying to get rid of the Jewishness of the gospel. He emphasizes it and underlines it. I don't know if anybody's ever heard that, but a lot of people will try to accuse Paul of getting rid of the Jewishness of Yeshua or the gospel. That's an absurdity. And definitely, these first 4 verses will show you that. Because if you're not founded, this is gobbledygook. And partly what I say you're not founded, there's another metaphor this is helpful as well. Because I want to bring you guys into concepts that are very foreign. Because I want you to bear more fruit. Those who are more founded, you could compare them to a cultivated olive shoot versus a wild olive shoot. Are you familiar with the concept that there's a difference between generationally cultivated plants by farmers and just wild strains of that same species? Are you familiar with that concept? No? Let's talk a little bit about husbandry. So when we're husbandry, I think it includes plants and animals.
Wow, I didn't know.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I'm catching myself here. It's an archaism, but I'm pretty sure it includes plants and animals. But it's the idea that someone who's going to try to create a crop from a species of plant, they will often try to get they'll try to get a strain of that species that other farmers have generationally cultivated, meaning they have picked out the ones that bear the most fruit, gotten rid of the rest. It's essentially like an unnatural selection. Okay, basically is what it is. It's farmers deciding like this one, don't like these ones. You're out. You're in. You have more babies. You're out. You're in. It's like dog breeding with plants. Do you understand this? Mm-hmm. Okay, it's pretty crazy how many breeds of dog come from basically a wolfish ancestor. Okay, and it's because of selective breeding by dog breeders. The same thing goes for plants. It's selective grooming and selective cultivation of plants. If I have a strain of plants or a strain of plant that's generations old, where farmers have had their hand in it, picking out the biggest and the best, okay. And then I'd say, okay, I've got a seed from that line. And then I just go to some wild strain. that has not had the help of hands guiding it. Okay, no human hands have tried to plant it. When I put that seed in the ground, what do you think the difference between fruit will be? Have you ever heard about this?
No.
Yeah, dramatic, gnarled, weak, piddly, unimportant. Okay, because they're not really concerned about human concerns. The plant seems to be concerned with reproduction. Okay, and reproduction in a whole series of environmental concerns that a farmer takes care of. See, a farmer removes all those environmental concerns, and he's like, let's just focus on the fruit. Okay, let's just focus on really great, fruit. Make sense? Are you tracking with me? Well, is anyone here Jewish? I'm not. Anybody here raised Jewish? I wasn't. Okay, we're the wild, gnarled seed. Okay. The Jewish people were taken by God and generationally cared for, taught the Torah, okay, given instruction and oracles and revelations of God. And so when I am trying to give you these, elements and these components so that you understand them, I'm trying to position you so that you bear as much fruit as possible. Okay. When Yeshua was talking to Nicodemus, the teacher of teachers in Israel, a Pharisee, he's able to go deep and go deep fast, immediately. Okay. When he's talking to a Syrophoenician, just Gentile woman who's yelling at him, he doesn't go deep. He keeps it incredibly simple. Okay. I want you guys to be deep in so you can understand this fuller picture, because more sight of what I am describing will result, and I'm telling you this truthfully, more sight in what I am describing with all of your faculties will result in more boldness, more filling of the Spirit, and more power. Here's what I mean by all of your faculties. I want you to imagine that your sight is a kind of faculty, but I want you to imagine that you're just like your outer body has eyes. I want you to imagine that your heart has eyes, your mind has eyes. I want you to imagine your conscience has eyes. Okay? It's a weird little metaphor. I want you to see in the deepest sense possible. I want you to see in all ways. Okay? And I'm actually more concerned that you see internally, even if you do not yet see externally. You will have to see externally. I will never teach the BS. Just exercise faith means don't follow evidence. That's retarded. Faithfulness defined in the New Testament is evidence. Like, faithfulness is synonymized with evidence. It's not about a lack of evidence. It is synonymized with evidence. It's the evidence of things unseen. Okay, this is similar to the fact that people can do the enormous engineering feat of making a gigantic hunk of metal fly across an ocean because they understand mathematical equations relating to gravity. No one knows what gravity is or how it works. I don't know if you know that. No one knows what gravity is or how it works. Okay? But we have evidence of gravity that we have collected and sifted with, and we can look at that evidence with mathematical precision. Okay? And in a similar way, God is happy to give you evidence. In the meantime, though, I want you to try to see what I'm saying with the deepest part of yourself and engage Yeshua in prayer, even as I'm presenting these things to you, and ask him to reveal to you, okay, what I'm saying in its application. Did you guys notice that when I taught you before that the word for spirit is wind? Right? Remember that? The word for spirit is wind. But I also said, but it also has to do with, it also is spoken of as water, which it is. Last night, one of the things I was meditating on is, what kind of substance would be described in equal measure as wind and water? Yes. It'd be a cloud. Okay, a mist, which is a similar concept. It'd be a cloud.
You're
That's
wrong.
exactly. Sorry. No, it's okay. No, miss. So cloud. This actually becomes really interesting because how does Yahweh give water to Israel? Basically, we're in Exodus 17. Does someone want to?
In Iran.
Yes, but That's not the first step. Go to Exodus 17. You're wrong. Go to Exodus 17. Let's just build a culture of this.
Exodus 17.
Yeah, Exodus 17.
Verse 1.
Yep, start verse 1.
And all the community of the Israelites set out from the desert of Sin for their journeys according to the command of Yahweh, and they camped in Rephidim, and there was no water for the people to drink. And the people quarreled with Moses, and they said, "Give us water so we can drink." And Moses said to them, "Why do you quarrel with me? Why do you test Yahweh?" And the people thirsted for water, and the people grumbled against Moses and said, "Why ever did you bring us up from Egypt to kill me and my sons and my cattle with thirst?" And Moses cried out to Yahweh, saying, "What will I do with this people? A little longer, and they will stone me." And Yahweh said to Moses, "Go on before the people and take with you some from the elders of Israel, and the staff with which you struck the Nile take in your hand and go. Look, I will be standing before you there on the rock in Horeb, and you will strike the rock, and water will come out from it, and the people will drink." And Moses did so before the eyes of the elders of Israel, and he called the name of the place Massah and Meribah because of the quarrel of the Israelites and because of their testing Yahweh by saying, "Is Yahweh in our midst or not?"
Yep. Okay. This episode is this is what Paul is describing when he says they had the same spiritual drink. He calls it a spiritual drink. And Paul is a side note. I don't know that it's super important for everyone, but Paul actually quotes not just the Hebrew version of this. He quotes from a Targum, which is an Aramaic version. And in the Targums, they'll sometimes expand the story. Okay, they're a later edition. And Paul's quoting from the Targum. He says the rock that followed them. So they actually believed that in the Targum, which is a later addition to the Torah, it's just the Torah translated and added to a degree. They said that this rock supernaturally followed Israel through the desert. Okay. Now he's picking up on this.
The rock that he would strike for water?
Yeah, that after this it began to follow them. And that picture, Paul has taken up that picture to give you the idea that, is that drink going away? That's one reason I think he's drawing on it. But he says the rock, which was Christ. The rock, which was Messiah. Was Messiah, if Messiah is the rock, was Messiah struck and then water came out of him?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. He actually prophesies and says, when he talks about himself and giving living water to the woman at the well, when he talks about he's at the water festival, he's at the end of the Feast of Tabernacles, and it's the most important day of the ceremony, or the most important ceremony on the greatest day of the feast, and they have this water pouring ceremony. Yeshua, by the way, this is a really cool picture of Yeshua. He is not politically correct. He is not gentle with people's rituals. He is not concerned with crowd control and what will the people say. Basically, I want you to imagine someone going to the Catholic Church in the middle of Easter Mass in the Vatican City, and the Pope is speaking. Okay, I want you to imagine that, and I want you to imagine a bearded man standing up and screaming as loud as he possibly can. And that is exactly what Yeshua did during the Feast of Booths. It's one of the three great feasts. So the Jewish people, even the Jewish people in the diaspora, would return to Jerusalem 3 times a year. The last great time they would return in a year is the Feast of Booths. So Jerusalem is packed. People are all around. On the greatest day of this last feast of the year that all men have to show up for, the priests are doing this kind of water ritual. Okay, and Yeshua stands up. And I'll actually read this. This is so cool. I love Messiah. So I just want you to imagine the kind of sobriety that people would associate with this ritual. Okay? Sorry, that's a fun night. My tongue's not ready. Okay. Sorry. Okay, he's not there. There's a feast already happened. With the typical you're going to tease. Okay. Sorry. Greatest day of the feast. Yes, sorry. Now on the last day of the feast, okay, we're in John 7:37. Now on the last day of the feast, the great day. Okay, so they're doing this ritual. That's on the last day. You're familiar with the ritual in the temple. They will have a very ornate ceremony with it's a water-oriented pouring ceremony, and the priest performs it. So on this last great day, people are there. Yeshua stands and cries out, "If anyone is thirsty, let him come to me and let him drink." Okay? The one who believes in me, just as the scripture said, out of his belly will flow rivers of living water. Now he said this concerning the Spirit, whom those who believed in him were about to receive, for the Spirit was not yet given because Yeshua had not yet been glorified. Okay.
What verse is that?
That's John 7:37 through 39. He is drawing on this picture, and he's presenting himself as one that if people come to him for drink, he will give it to them. He will provide them with the drink they desire. If they drink from him, they will not be thirsty. This is not a new picture. So a lot of times people will approach Yeshua, and they're basically like this. I love Jesus. He's really great. I think he's wonderful. I'm being drawn to the New Testament. I only read the New Testament. I don't really care about the Old Testament. People are telling me the Old Testament doesn't matter. It's great. Jesus said all these fresh things, these new things. Actually, Yeshua said a lot of things that are thousands of years old. Most of everything Yeshua ever says in his earthly ministry is rooted in sayings, revelations, and oracles that are thousands of years old. The wildly new thing that's going on is he is taking revelations and sayings and oracles that apply to Yahweh and applying them to himself, or that apply to the Spirit and applying them to himself, or that apply to the temple and applying it to himself. And not doing it in an egalitarian way, saying, hey, it's true of all of us because we're all Israel. Okay? He's saying, nope, it's only about me. Okay? This is partly why people who encounter Yeshua and trying to make sense out of him say, he's possessed, he's a demon. Okay? This might be the equivalent of a modern person being like, he's batshit crazy, he's schizophrenic, he's, insane.
It's John 10, right?
Sure.
Is it John 10 where the Pharisees or the people
Say
of Judea say that Jesus is possessed by a demon?
I wish it was only John 10. It's in John 7. It's all over his ministry. And in John, it's multiple times they accuse him. Are you not the demon possessed and the son of a Samaritan? Don't you have a demon? Are we right to say you have a demon? You cast out demons, but kinds of demons. There's all kinds of examples of this. And one of the reasons, this would be why, because typically people who claim to be Yahweh don't get very far. People who claim to be God. Okay, there's actually a movie coming out, and my dude from Game of Thrones is in it.
Peter Dinklage.
Peter Dinklage is in it. Two other actors really great. I don't know who the main dude is. Who's the dude from Pretty Woman? Old actor. Richard Gere. I think Richard Gere's in it. Thank you back there. I think Richard Gere's in it. But I don't know if it's called Three Jesuses, but it's basically three insane asylum commitments who all claim to be Jesus. And this is based on true story. And so it's a true story. The way that this psychiatrist tries to walk them through it is he puts them all in the same room. And it makes them go at it. It's absurd. But that's typically how it goes when now this is after Jesus because he succeeded. But people who claim to be the God of Israel, for example, you would not really get very far. Partly because people who are doing that tend to not take care of themselves well. Maybe they don't bathe. Maybe they don't. Maybe they forget where they are. Maybe they go in and out of manic depressive states. Maybe whatever. They didn't really know what to do with a lot of the claims Yeshua was making. But one of the components. This is actually part of Scotty Talk. One of the components that I really wanted to focus on was this idea of the cloud, water, and wind. And so the idea of being baptized into the cloud. This is a really, really cool bridge, the concept of the cloud, to understand Yeshua. That one word, cloud, can help you understand a lot about what Yeshua was saying about himself. It'll help you unpack a lot of his riddles. It'll help you unpack a lot of what the New Testament is still trying to say about him, wrestling to say. you can actually see that there is a wrestling going on in the New Testament, in these early New Testament writings, to try to explain to people what it is that Messiah is, what it is that Yeshua is. And the writing is having to keep pace with signs and wonders and power, which is a good problem to have. Nobody sat down and tried to decide how all these things wonderfully and perfectly fit together in a study hall, okay, or in a Beit Midrash. They weren't doing that. They didn't have the time. They were seeing the Spirit was breaking out in power, and they were having to move in people's lives. They were having to sort out nonsense among Gentiles and try to convince the Jewish people that God is trying to draw the Gentiles into this covenant, but you can maintain your Jewishness. And Yeshua is the Messiah of the Jews. And yes, he is widening the birth to include Gentiles before he reverses the exile and takes back Jerusalem. That was very problematic. This is a large reason why, there are many historical reasons why the Jewish people fled the movement. Because for the first 150 years, it was a near exclusively Jewish movement. Thought of that way, prosecuted that way. So there was a big shift, and there's a lot of different reasons for that. But the cloud. The cloud has a function. There's this, Yahweh is described as a gloria, a kavod, a heavy thing. You can imagine, like literally a heaviness is how you could translate kavod. Okay? And that's similar to the way we would say, oh man, that's heavy. But it might also be helpful to think of it in a different parable. In modern physics, the idea of a black hole. These are the heaviest objects in the universe. It's when a massive star explodes, when a star dies in its life cycle, and then it's so heavy that it actually collapses in on itself. And the amount of gravity is so powerful that not only can it not escape itself, even light can't escape it. Okay, heavy. That might be helpful to try to think about Yahweh's heaviness. This idea of a point of collapse that nothing can escape. It's hugely heavy. Good metaphor. But this glory is also described as being bright, splendorous, blinding, even, right? And light itself. All kinds of different terms like this. Do you want a thing like that just to, like Nightcrawler, bamf in and out of the Assembly of Israel? That would be terrifying. And so instead, when God shows up locally, he shows up shrouded. What's he shrouded in? He's shrouded in a cloud. He literally covers his glory with a cloud everywhere he goes. Covers his glory with a cloud everywhere he goes. Okay? And that cloud is basically water and wind, and with God. All right? And when glory appears to Israel, he's always enshrouded in a cloud. He's never unclouded. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Nobody sees the glory of Yahweh unclouded except for one person, Moshe. And he doesn't even see him face to face without the cloud. He sees his back. There's a possible reading of the difference between Exodus 33 that says he talked to his man like a friend, and you can't see my face lest you die, you only see my back. And one could be describing that the pillar of cloud came into the tent, and Moshe spoke to Yahweh in the cloud, mano y mano, face to face, like before each other, in each other's presence is one way to read that. And so there's no threat there because the cloud is there. Okay, what Moshe is asking for is more. Moshe wants more. Give me more. I want to see your glory. I want to pass through the veil. I want to get past the cloud. I want to see you. And Yahweh understands the request. And this was, I'll let you, but you can't see my face. You'll die. You need to look at you. You'll see my gav, my back. Okay. And that's what we're describing. This cloud is a kind of a garb that Yahweh, you could say, wears in reality, and it hides his splendor and his beauty and his light. The glory is also described, it's synonymous often with, how do you say, Noam, the beauty of Yahweh, okay? The beauty of Yahweh is often synonymous with glory, his beauty, and it's described in different terms. So that's hidden, though. It's hidden. Now, this is really cool because whenever you find Yahweh, you're going to see that cloud. Well, at night, it's a pillar of fire. Okay? Yahweh is described as the consuming fire. That actually is fitting with the glory. One of the things I want to look into more a little bit is they don't have a scientific nuance that we do when we use two terms. When we say lightning and we say fire, we think of very different natural phenomena. But a lot of ancient people didn't, because it looks like fire, it's really bright, and when it touches the ground, it actually leaves fire. Okay, so it's not too far to be like, oh, fire. Okay, to call it streaks of fire, to speak of fire in the cloud, or this kind of thing. Okay, it's not that far away. So that's one possible. The other possible read is that they did think of it as a fire, this splendorous, glorious fire. And so I don't know if at night the cloud dissipated. I don't think so. I think what happened is it just blazed, and the cloud was somehow maybe translucent or something like this, and it provided light. This is the kind of stuff people don't talk about or discuss or think about. It's just like, don't care. Yeah, what?
It's just kind of like a burning bush sort of thing.
That's actually a really great read. That's a great way to connect understanding Yahweh in the cloud, is to say, okay, does Yahweh appear in another form, right? Yeah, he does appear in the form of a fire. And that's actually not the first time that Yahweh will appear in some kind of fiery form. Yahweh appears in a fiery form to Abraham when he makes a covenant with him, except for some reason he's a fire in a pot. Okay, that's how we're translating it. And the fire in the pot is visible, and it's molten on the inside. This is I guess it's a common way for Yahweh to be depicted. Also, the presence of Yahweh is associated with flaming fire. Like when he sets up cherubim at the gate of the Garden of Eden, they have swords made out of fire that flash back and forth. Okay?
He also takes a coal from the good fire, right, for Isaiah?
Yep. Later on, he will take a coal. An angel will take, which the angel is actually a seraph. Okay, and these angels are literally described as flames. That's one way to translate it: burning or flames, or a burning serpent. They're like fiery serpents, and that fire.
Dragons.
The fiery,
Dragons.
not dragons. Don't do that.
They're dragons. Dragons.
Ah!
Throne Guardians is dragons. Dragons are real, and now using the Guard of Stone.
Okay.
Don't do that.
It's not. That's
There are going to be dragons in the church too. I'm going to be one of the first
I left
dragons.
my kids at home on purpose.
Okay. Okay. All right. Dragon. That's where we were.
Dragons.
You got all four of the elements: earth, water, wind, and fire.
Oh, man. All we need is heart.
Yeah.
Okay. No. Okay. Cool. So, yes, this concept of fire is very closely correlated to Yahweh's local presence, and it's obscured by this cloud thing, and it's covered in a storm cloud. So I'm going to give you a picture, though. This is kind of like, where would I see a place that has wind, water, and something like internal fire? It would be a storm. They would call lightning fire. So there is this idea that Yahweh is peculiarly associated with the storm cloud, with storms, which is why when he strikes people in theological language, like cosmic language, not, hey, we saw him strike somebody, but when he's depicted in theological terms, he'll be depicted as hurling bolts of lightning while treading the clouds. And not just treading the clouds, he rides them. Okay? And they're not dry clouds. These are not waterless clouds. They're associated with storm. So you have this picture, right? That picture continues. That cloud fills the temple of Shlomo, for example. Well, the cloud will fill the tent that Moshe is going to construct and stay in the Holy of Holies. That thing sits on top of the ark. Then it fills the temple Shlomo builds. Okay. Then it leaves. That thing leaves. Remember, fire as well. And when Yahweh is depicted in really anthropomorphic human terms, the bottom half of him is basically described as being on fire in Ezekiel. And then that thing leaves. This may seem like, okay, into that, and more of that stuff. But it's not actually. Luke picks up on this, and he uses a core word. Mark uses this word, I think, as well, but Luke grabs hold of it and uses it at key points to let you know what he means. It's a word that in Greek is overshadowed. Overshadowed. All right? Which is a way to describe a tent being put over sometimes, or to be covered in a cloud. And the Greek word only occurs, I think it only occurs once, be mistaken, but I'm pretty sure it only occurs once in the Greek Old Testament, the LXX. It only occurs in Exodus 40, where the glory of Yahweh, the cloud, descends and overshadows the tabernacle and comes into it. Okay? That verb is used by Luke when he says, the glory overshadowed Mary. The glory overshadowed Mary for Yeshua to be formed inside her. Very, very powerful claim. Anybody who knew their Torah, this is the thing, Yeshua purposely spoke in riddles. If he would come outright and say the things that I say about him regularly, he would have been killed early on. And you can read the Synoptic Gospels and understand that Yeshua is aware of the threat to his ministry. He knows it will end in death, but he doesn't want it to end in death too quickly. He has things to accomplish. Okay. So he doesn't outrightly say these things, but if people understood their Torah, they were deep in their Torah, and they were deep in the writings of the Jewish people, and they were longing for the exile, and they were in texts that the people of God had meditated on in addition to the Torah, the prophets, and the writings, so the Psalms, Wisdom of Solomon, the books of Maccabees, the books of Enoch, the book of Enoch. There are all different pools that Jewish people were reading from and meditating on. Most thoroughly the Torah. If people were saturated in these texts, they would understand that Yeshua is making really radical claims. And this is partly why the Mount of Transfiguration is so important, because in a way, this is similar to the idea that Peter, James, and John are baptized in the cloud. It's a very weird notion. It's a weird read. This was something I was meditating on last night. It's a way to imagine this and think about it. When we see that, what happens? What happens when they go on the Mount of Transfiguration? We don't know the mountain. Dr. Michael Heiser thinks that it's Hermon, okay, in the northern territory, which was associated with demonic entities. He thinks that's the mountain they went on, but not knowing what the mountain was, they go up on top of the mountain, and Peter, James, John, and just Isaiah 53, boring Jesus, okay? Isaiah 53 says he had no appearance that we should desire him, and there's nothing attractive about him outwardly. So boring Yeshua goes up on the mountain with these three Talmidim, these three disciples with him, and he's not boring Jesus anymore suddenly. For a moment, the veil, the thing that shrouds Yeshua's identity, is removed, and he looks like this molten figure in Ezekiel. And then Moshe shows up, Eliyahu shows up, and they start talking to Yeshua about his plans for what he's going to do in Jerusalem. Peter, James, and John, remember, like I've depicted, I believe these guys are youngins. These guys were young. Peter doesn't die until 62 AD. It's possible he's a very, 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 very old man, but it's more likely that he's just an old man and that he was very young in the ministry of Yeshua. And so Peter, James, and John, Peter's scared. He doesn't know what to say. Mark, which is essentially the gospel we get from Peter, emphasizes Peter's role in this exchange. Peter, not knowing what to say and is scared, he says, it's good that we should be here. Let us build a tent for you, one tent for Moshe, one tent for Eliyahu, and one tent for you, Yeshua. Okay, they recognize who these men are. But they don't get the chance to get a response or reply because the cloud envelopes them and enshrouds them, and a voice booms from within the cloud. This is my beloved son, whom I have chosen. Okay. Listen to him. Obey him. Listen to him. They're terrified. At this point, they're monstrously terrified. And they fall on their faces, all three of them. Which is actually a very normal human response in a situation like this, of terror. And they hide from it. And the moment that they're done with their hiding, everything stops and they open their eyes. Boring Yeshua again. Boring Yeshua. Here's a helpful metaphor. When I tell you that you're baptized in the Spirit, and I say that the Spirit is Yeshua, we can correlate this idea of being baptized in the cloud. If Yeshua is the same concept, Yahweh among us, what is Yeshua's cloud? What's Yeshua's cloud? What's obscuring us from seeing the real thing? His flesh. His flesh. Which is partly why John will take the approach to say the Logos became tabernacled among us. Well, it became flesh. The Logos became flesh and tabernacled among us. So, in the same way that the glory of Yahweh will be hidden by this cloud, this mist, and you wouldn't be able to see Yahweh. In a very similar way, when we see Yeshua, we may be deceived by the cloud. We may be deceived by the cloud. This is a possible. There are different ways to read. Paul probably has a deeper statement than just the surface level. Paul says, we all used to regard Yeshua according to the flesh, but no longer do we do this. Okay? And if you were to judge Yeshua by that outer appearance, you would fail his test. His test for all consciences is, who do you say that I am? Okay? If you judge him based on that cloud, exploring apparently carpenter's son, you fail. You fail his test, and you'll answer incorrectly. But there is this idea of baptism. It continues, the idea of being baptized in the cloud. Here's what's interesting, though. What does it mean to be baptized with fire? Because this is pertinent, right? This is something we've got to figure out. Because I've only been citing half of the verse. Each time I've quoted it the last few times in these talks on baptism. And John the Baptist says, I baptize with water, but one's coming after me who's going to baptize with the Holy Spirit and fire. The Holy Spirit and fire. Now, one way to read that is Holy Spirit baptism, and then after that, fire baptism. Okay, that's one way to read that. I don't think that's the way to read it. I think the way to read it is like a, it's a synecdoche. Is it synecdoche? What is this? No, it's a hendiadys. It's two things connected with a conjunction that's actually one thing. An example we do in English is, we'll do this, that's nice and cozy, nice and warm. We use nice a lot for hendiadys or a hendiadys in English. We'll put nice at the front, put the word and in the middle, and add some other adjective. How this concept works is, we know that we can get rid of the word and if we just add ly to it. What we really mean is it's nicely warm, or it's nicely cozy. It's actually one composite idea, but we're breaking it up with a conjunction. They did this in Hebrew a lot. Okay, so when he says, "I'll baptize you with Holy Spirit and fire," okay, you could say, "I'll baptize you with a fiery spirit." That'd be one way to see it. Okay, or a spirit of a fire.
Holy Spirit.
Okay, this is what we're going to get to. It's the idea that so when the apostles and the 120 disciples are baptized with the Holy Spirit, what form do they see the Spirit? The form of a dove? No.
The Spirit came down the flames of fire and the
Tongues in the shape. It's a flames of fire in the shape of tongues rested on their head. Came at the center of their head. Now, here's part of the reason that would happen is this. It's not the first time that Yahweh immersed a thing in flames. Yahweh touched down and immersed something in flames. That happens a lot in the Torah or in the Psalms and the Tanakh. But one of the most important times, I would say the most important time, is where he descends on Mount Horeb, on Mount Sinai. Okay? With a fiery host of angels. And if you read Deuteronomy, it's terrifying. There is a cloud that obscures the top of the mountain, but there's also a beam of fire that shoots from the cloud. And that's him there. He's residing there semi-permanently. Remember, it's going to take 40 days for Moshe to go down. So he's going to be there in that fire. Okay. And this fire rests on this mountain. What is happening while the fire is on that mountain? What's Yahweh doing?
Talking to Moses.
Not just Moses. That's what's weird about this event, because up to this point, Yahweh's only spoken to Moshe, and maybe to Aaron in Moshe's presence.
The Israelites.
The entire assembly of Israel, Yahweh speaks out loud, and he gives the 10 Devarim, the 10 commandments, the 10 words, the 10 commandments. He speaks them. So that's why the tongue is there, because it's the idea that it's the law, it's instruction, it's the Torah. And this is a ancient hope that when the exile was reversed, Jeremiah prophesied that instead of the Torah being in a box, instead of the old covenant being like it was when I took Israel by the hand of Egypt, I will make a new covenant. Days are coming where I'll make a new covenant with the house of Israel and the house of Judah. And I will take my Torah and I will write it on their hearts and in their minds. And no longer will they say each one to his neighbor, know Yahweh, for each of them, from the least to the greatest, will know me, says Yahweh. And so this idea that the reception of the Spirit is synonymous with receiving the Torah, which is why it would come in the form of this tongue of fire. That Yahweh, I think people are tempted to read that as they spoke in tongues. Therefore, that's why it's in the shape of a tongue. Okay. It's not that. It's the proclamation. They're speaking with authority. It's not them speaking. They are partnering with it, but it's not them. The origin and author of the words they speak is not them. It's that fire. It's the Spirit. And this is something all believers should expect and experience regularly. Let's talk practical in terms of like just a sad thing that happens frequently. Sadly, when I talk to Christians, outside of our community, not only in our community, that's not true. There are a lot of believers that are good friends with me that are outside of our community. They're seeking vibrant connections with God, but they're the outliers. They're not the norm. The normal Christian that I run into, okay, when's the last time Yeshua spoke to you? Oh, 6 months ago, I went on a mission trip for a week, and I was just really moved about I needed to stop this thing I was doing in my life. Okay. How often should I hear from Yeshua? It's a question I often, when I ask that person, sometimes I do. If they'll stay long enough to answer it, we'll discuss it. But it's the idea that we should be hearing from Yeshua non-stop. There are two questions to figure out whether or not you really need to hear from Yeshua a lot. How much does Yeshua love your neighbor? So how much does he need to tell you things to say to them? And how evil are you? How much does he need to say to you, stop doing the things you want to do? Those are the real questions to figure out the frequency. I add those two things together. I find Yeshua really loves my neighbors more than I do. I want to ignore them and avoid them. He makes me want to talk to them. And I find that I'm incredibly evil. And pretty frequently he's like, don't do that. Don't even think that. Why are you going in that direction? Well, okay. I like to ask people who give me an answer like that once they say, even they'll say, I don't really hear from God. I just feel him when I worship, stuff like this. Okay. I like to say, okay, when was the last time Yeshua commanded you to do something you didn't want to do? Let's cut to the bone. When's the last time Yeshua commanded you to do something you didn't want to do? That's the way I want to find it if Yeshua lives in someone. He does it to me frequently. Okay? This is like, if you've ever seen the Corny movie, I know people don't like Venom. I like Venom for the teaching that it provides. The idea that there's an alien life form, the symbiote, that co-opts and co-occupies Eddie Brock's consciousness. And they have different wills and different agendas. The one has the superior position, the symbiote, and it can access everything that's inside Eddie Brock. Eddie Brock cannot yet, I suspect later on in the comics they'll expand on it that he could have some interaction, but typically the symbiote can access all of his consciousness, but the symbiote is restricted. He has restricted access. Eddie Brock can't actually see every single thing that's in there. Okay? In a kind of similar way, this is what it's like to be occupied by Yahweh through Yeshua the Messiah via the Spirit. And so he does disagree with our agendas frequently. Okay? Albeit on very different grounds from the symbiote and Venom. Sorry. One of my favorite lines. Violated spinal bodies. Sorry. But he said it. He said it as a. He actually said that as. I love that he said that as a explanation. Sorry. Anyways, it went in a different world. I was actually seeing it. I want to discuss what the significance of these tongues of fire are. If Yahweh descends speaking in a fire on Mount Sinai, what does it say if the Spirit doesn't? Does the Spirit appear as a single giant tongue? It diverts, and it turns into a tongue of fire on each conscience. Meaning, if the enemy wants to stop this work, I know what I'll do. When Moshe's on the mountain, I will tempt them to covet and to put gods on Yahweh's face and make a golden calf. I have one base of a mountain to deal with, Sinai. Okay? Now from the enemy's perspective, on the day of Pentecost. I do not have one Sinai to deal with. I have 120. Oh shit, they talk for 2 hours. I have 3,120. Okay? So so this is it's more of a, it's just like the fact that Yahweh co-opts such weaklings and brings them into what he's doing, it's a democratization on an enormous level, meaning it used to be restricted, and only a handful of us, only one of us ever got to go into the Holy of Holies. Now all of us are brought to the top of Mount Sinai as a baseline, like our first experience of the Spirit. That's ours, and that is baptism. That's baptism with the Spirit and fire. It's enormous authority. It's enormous responsibility. It's enormous glory and enormous beauty, right? And it's a transformation of us. What happens to Moshe when he spends time in that fire? His face shines like who? Like Yahweh. Why? Because he's talking to Yahweh. He's interacting with Yahweh directly. When he comes down, he looks like an Elohim. This is probably because what are humans? Humans are Selim Elohim, the image or form of God. The shadow, if you translate that word, shadow, image, or form. The shadow, the image, the form of God. If we wanted to bring those words together in a modern concept so that we could see a thing that we're trying to attract that should look like us, we call that a mirror. A mirror. When we actually draw close to Yahweh, he doesn't reflect us. We start to conform to our role of being the image of God, being a mirror, and we start to reflect him. We look like him. We start to talk like him. We start to sound like him. Okay? We reflect the glory of God. That also is in view of the change that's going to take place if you surrender to the Spirit that you receive. Right? But we need a change in property. Why? Why do we need a change in property? Why do we need to be like God? And I mean this more in a physical sense. And in Moses' situation, why do you need God's property? God's properties. So you don't die. Okay? So we have to become beings that can survive fire. Now here's another dark read. Yeshua will immerse not just us in fire. First he'll immerse believers in fire in the sense of the Holy Spirit. But he has the intentions of immersing everything in fire. Remember, Yahweh made a promise. The promise was not, I'm going to ignore that every inclination of the thoughts of man's heart are only evil from the time they're young, because I really like the smell of the sacrifice. That's not what he said. He said, I'll never destroy it again with water. I won't do this again. But the idea of him drowning everything again in a weird way didn't go away. And that's baptism. The New Testament, this is actually, I'll start with the minor prophets. The minor prophets were obsessed with this concept. Yahweh treating the world the way that the priests would treat the precious objects and vessels in the temple. How would you clean those? You would use water, but you scour them with fire to cleanse them. This becomes a very powerful metaphor. We are filthy. Israel has become filthy through the exile. And we need you to come, Yahweh. We need you to show up locally, and we need you to cleanse and purify and refine every one of us with fire and with flames. This is why it says, he will, the angel of the covenant you desire, Yahweh, the Lord, will return to his own temple, and he will refine the tribe of Levi, as one refines with a launderer's alkali, and with flames he'll purify them. John the Baptist picks up these words directly, and when he describes the Messiah, he says he is coming to destroy with fire and with flames. That's why he's very confused when he sees boring Jesus, boring Yeshua. Okay. It's like, are you the one that we're supposed to expect, or someone else coming? Boring Yeshua is God's parable, God's test. Again, he's done this over and over again. He obfuscated himself when he came down to. He likely obfuscated himself when he came down to Noah. We don't know that, but he did come down to Noah. He obfuscated himself when he came down to Abraham multiple times. He obfuscated himself when he came down to Noah, the father of Samson. He obfuscated himself when he came down to Gideon. When I say obfuscate, I mean shrouds himself, hides himself, makes it, he doesn't show who he is. Yeshua is this living parable. He is, he's the test. His flesh is the test. Now, he will come again, and there will no longer be any obfuscation. Test will be over. In a weird way, because a day is 1,000 years, 1,000 years is a day. Yahweh is using this gospel to go out and spread this message. And the test, who do you say that I am, is ongoing. And people are being added to the number. Right? People are being added to the number of followers of Yeshua, and they're being transformed and empowered by the Holy Spirit and sealed, in other words, marked with the Holy Spirit. But he will come in a form that is not enshrouded at all. And he will come to immerse, just like Yahweh immersed the world in water. Yeshua comes with his holy angels in accordance with multiple texts in the New Testament. He will, in a very wild, ecstatic prophetic vision, he will baptize creation in fire. It's a radical picture. But those who have been sealed and marked and are in his image, they will be with him and they will join him in the cloud and they will bear his image. Okay? And this is probably why we assemble on Shabbat. We descend on the synagogue, episynagogue. We will episynagogue in the clouds when Yeshua calls for us. Okay? That is actually a picture and a hope that we're supposed to be aiming towards and longing for. It's the point of our baptism. Okay? It's the ultimate. That's going to be the ultimate baptism, where mortality is swallowed with immortality. Immortality perishes, and what remains is immortal. That's the resurrection. We do not yet know what we'll be like. We know we'll be like him.
That's like building with straw.
Yeah, exactly. So we can go full circle with our conversation. You can build things that are vain and empty and won't survive the fire that's coming. Mm-hmm. You can build things that are with wood and straw and hay, and you can really like it. Like you could even build a mega church and have really great video production and really seeker-friendly services, and you can even get people to read a few verses and all this kind of stuff and call themselves Christians and say they love Jesus. You can get people to do a lot of different things. The question is going to be, will it survive either the storms the enemy sends or the fire that Yeshua himself brings? So I would say that the only way to survive that coming is to be baptized with fire and to be changed into to possess the properties of Yeshua, the one who will wield it, right? To be transformed in his image, to become like him, to follow him, so that right now we end up with his destiny. And remember, this is what's so beautiful about this. Yahweh actually descended, took on the form of a weak, meager worm of a man, a human being, and did the same kind of steps. He had to nurse on his mother's breast, toddle around and learn to walk, had to drink water and sleep lest he get tired, eat, learn a trade from his father in carpentry, live a normal life, face off against dark forces as a human, face off against celestial forces as a human, face off against other humans who hated him, wanted to murder him, eventually succeeded at and murdered him, and then reascended back to this place of name above all names. So he has not even just said, hey, I'll stay super powerful and here's the way. He's like, I will literally walk this way before him. And I will leave from that ascended position and descend again in the form of the Holy Spirit and fill you, and I will help you walk the exact same route. Again, you guys are supposed to be Yeshua's life on repeat. And baptism is the only way we can do it. So, yeah, that's a lot, and today's pretty scattered. So, are there any questions or discussion points?
I have 2 questions.
Yeah.
My first question was would Yahweh coming down as the fire to consume the sacrifices be in that pattern?
Yep. Absolutely, it's
Okay.
in that pattern. And you'll see that the 2 times when I said he came to Manoah and Gideon in a human form, he'll do this weird thing where he has a staff. And they think they're just talking to a bro Israelite. They start to be suspicious it's not a bro Israelite because of some of the stuff he's saying, and he knows the insides of them, and they've never seen him. Like when ancient people see a stranger, you have to understand this is super bizarre for a lot of ancient people who live in very rural times. It's not uncommon. Dad goes on a journey that should only take 2 moons, and dad never comes back. Okay? That's not super unrealistic. It's not super unrealistic. I had twins. Now I have one because a cougar came into our tent and ate the other. This is a completely different world. Okay? So when you have this stranger that he's not from our town or our village, and he shows up, who the hell is this guy? Very weird. They just think, but as he talks, they're not really sure. And then they're like, well, let me give you, if they're suspicious, they say, well, let me bring you some meat. In both instances, he takes the staff, touches the meat, and it sets on fire, which is like, I received it from you as a meal. And then he disappears. He does this twice. He does it with Manoah, and he does it with Gideon.
He consumes the food with the fire. He consumes the food.
Yes, and then disappears. And they're like,
He's got like 3 cats.
they're like, here's a meal, and he's like, good. It's a burnt offering. And like, it's gone. So what's the second question?
My second question was Moses striking the rock and water coming out, being in the being a foreshadowing to Yeshua being struck and water coming out.
Yeah.
What would be the equivalent of Moses striking the rock twice and then not being able to go into the promised land?
Yeah, it's an interesting point. I don't know if we should read those as together
Okay.
and see them as one kind of concept, or we should see them separately. I do know this, what is significant is Moshe's failure is the historical seal of the need for the Messiah. Because he literally, think of all the Moshe sacrificed. And I'll give you the parallels to the Messiah. One who was seen as abnormal from the time he was born by his parents, who a monarch tried to kill along with other males, and they escaped it. Okay? Who was raised by another man, but that was not his father, Moshe, raised in Pharaoh's court. Okay? Actually has a different origin, even though he allies himself with people like the Egyptians. Okay? Has to go out into the wilderness, be commissioned by God, return to the people with a message. I'm sent to you. We're now going to go and escape. Does signs and wonders. Okay? Faces off the greatest enemy, the greatest human enemy alive at the time, greatest empire. Goes, sees the gods that fall behind them fall as well and defeats them. Okay? Goes through all of this. Everything Moshe sacrificed, everything Moshe gave up, his entire life. Okay? Gone. Gone because of his fury, because of his anger, and really because of his proximity to Yahweh. It's really that simple. I will show myself as holy among those who are near to me, is what he says. You didn't show yourself, you didn't sanctify me in front of the people, you didn't treat me as holy. That's how he responds to him striking the rock. And the requirement of holiness is the most fierce for the people who have the greatest proximity, which is why truly ignorance is bliss, and ignorance is kind of a blessing. Knowledge of Yahweh is a curse in a way, because you'll be held accountable for it. So it at least sets up the historical groundwork for why we need the Messiah. Other questions?
Yeah. If we're called to live like Yeshua, why are we not living nomadically?
Why are we not living nomadically? Why are we not living itinerantly? Okay. When Yeshua says, Yeshua talks to his apostles, and he says, you have to hate your wife, you have to hate your mother, your father, your husband, these kinds of things, whatever. You have to give up your property, this kind of stuff. There's a point like this where he's saying something similar to this, and Peter says, Lord, look at everything we've given up. Right? Look at everything we've left behind. They joined him in being itinerant. And he says, I tell you the truth, you will get more of these back in this age with persecution and in the age to come. Houses, fields, wealth, family, friends, all of this. Okay? There is a time that is coming, and also already arrived in Acts, right? Where people people lived and continued living in their assemblies in their community, but they assembled themselves in their homes in their community, expecting for these things to be temporary. So we are living like Yeshua, or we're at least living like the early church that followed Yeshua in Acts, to the degree that we are saying none of this stuff is permanent. It is temporary. How do I use it, therefore? And I will say in our community, we do try to use our homes as temporary. So we have so many families living together. We do try to use our resources as temporary. Like, it's better to share what we have today than to pretend that we can build some kingdom that lasts for 1,000 generations. And I do actually think Yeshua will call some of us to live in ways that are more conformed to how he lived. I think if someone's going to function as an apostle, they're going to eventually have to do that. The time scale will be different. Sometimes Paul was able to stay in a place for 3 years. Sometimes he stayed in a place for 6 months. Okay, but there are people with different callings and different gifts who will function in itinerant ways. Yeah. Any other questions, discussion points? No? Okay. Hit this button and I'm going to run to the car. All right. Bless you guys. All right. Let's see here.
We clap now, or?